Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I'd like to share with you some reflections on the gospel of this 27th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Now, imagine you go to a restaurant, a nice one, and you're sitting down at the table looking at the menu, and the waiter comes over. And he says, "I'd like to interest you in the special of the day. It is a delightful Chateaubriand, cooked in the traditional French fashion with a velvety red wine sauce. Accompanying that will be root vegetables in their own garlic butter sauce, with a nice risotto to the side. May I suggest pairing that with a lovely red wine? Perhaps you would like a Merlot from Napa Valley or a Cabernet Sauvignon from Los Robles. Your order, please." Now imagine you hear all that and you say, I just want a cheeseburger and a Coke. And then imagine the waiter saying, "Excuse me? You just heard what I said about that Chateaubriand? And you want a cheeseburger and a Coke?" I'm afraid I need an explanation for that order. Now, what would be our response to that waiter? Now, wouldn't it be we'd be surprised, but we'd say, "Excuse me, I don't have to give you an explanation for what I want to order. I want a cheeseburger and a Coke. You're the waiter. I'm the patron. I ordered a Coke and a cheeseburger. Bring me the food I want." Right. That's the way the relationship works. And that might sound a little rough in our ears, but that's what we expect. And that example is kind of at the heart of the gospel today, where Jesus talks about the servants who are out working in the field and they come in, and the master doesn't sit the servants down and serve them food, even though they've been working all day. No. In fact, the servants come in and they serve the master the food, and then they go feed themselves. That's the relationship. That's the way it works. And like I said, even though that may sound a little bit demanding in our ears, for the people in the time of Jesus, it certainly was not. It made perfect sense. In the time of Jesus, more than 2/3 of the population lived at some point in time or another in their lives as either a slave or as an indentured servant, paying off a debt. And so they were very familiar with that idea of having to work for another person and really not having to demand any kind of recompense or any kind of credit. Jesus even said, when all is said and done, we simply say, I am nothing more than, one translation is, a wretched servant, or I am nothing more than a miserable servant, or perhaps even the best translation is, I am a servant to whom nothing is owed. That's right. I'm not owed credit. I'm not owed an explanation. I am simply doing what the master is commanding. Now remember, this parable was told in response to the question that the disciples asked Jesus when they said, "How can our faith grow?" And Jesus' answer is not by worshiping more fervently or through more prayer or devotion. His answer is, your faith grows through obedience. Obey God, and you could have faith that could do anything. But that can be a little difficult or off-putting in our ears. Obey God. Especially when the commands we're being asked to obey may not make sense to us or may be frustrating us. There are sometimes we want God to give an explanation of himself. In the first reading from the prophet Habakkuk, he sees in the streets of Jerusalem terrible violence and terrible disaster, and he is asking God, why? And Job, in the book of Job, he said to God, when Job was suffering so badly, "Come down here and explain yourself to me." And they're not alone. We find ourselves wondering, why does God allow so much violence to happen in our streets? Why does God allow so much violence and suffering to happen to us? We often find ourselves demanding an answer of God. Not too different from that waiter in the restaurant demanding to know why someone chose a cheeseburger. What explanation do you have of yourself? And what is the response? God basically says to Habakkuk, to Job, to us, I am the master. You're the servant. Obey me. And I don't need to give you an explanation for what I have asked of you. Now, that likewise may sound a little bit off-putting, but it's not. We've heard that even when we were little. Our parents would tell us to do something, take out the trash or wash the dishes or whatever. And if we ever said to them, why? Why do I have to do it? What was the answer? Because I said so. Do what I tell you to do. Right. And that's what basically God is saying to us. Do what I tell you to do, and your faith will grow. Obey me. And what are the commands? Well, they could be challenging ones. God commands us to forgive. And not just forgive, but forgive 7 times, 70 times. And not just forgive those who are sorry, but to forgive those who are not sorry. To forgive those who have wounded us deeply and seek for reconciliation, or for those who have wounded us deeply and do not. We are to forgive all. God commands us, take care of the widow and the orphan in your midst. Or in other words, all the people who are poor, who live on the margins of society, you must care for them. And we cannot say back to God, we don't have the economic resources to take care of all the poor people. No. God is saying to us, obey me. You must care for them. Just as he said once, you must care for the foreigner in your midst. Remember, in the land of Egypt, you too were once foreigners. We cannot respond to God saying, now, God, we got a terrible immigrant problem here in this country. We can't take care of all the immigrants. No. God is saying to us, you take care of them. You care for that stranger, that foreigner, that immigrant in your midst. That's the command. And if we do follow the Lord's commands, something wonderful is born into the world that cannot be born if we do not. And this is what Jesus is saying to his apostles. If you obey the Father's commands, something wonderful will be born into the world, and you will see that wonder, and your faith will grow. So, today, perhaps our prayer is that prayer that we've heard echoed for centuries throughout Scripture. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Today, we make ourselves ready, once again understanding God is the master, I am the servant, and we make ourselves ready to hear his command and to follow it.